Creeper is not what you think it is. In fact, it's actually a very long time ago, there were many different species who inhabited the overworld, but one day a few of the more major ones united to form the ancient civilization. And together as the ancient civilization, they were able to build massive cities, known to us today as the ancient cities. And inside of these massive ancient cities, the intelligent people loved to experiment and learn. They were even able to create massive mechanical machines and were able to uncover many secrets of the animals in the world. But while they were doing all this, they recorded themselves, so that way they could teach future generations about past projects and preserve valuable knowledge. And the ancient people were able to do that by using a small invention of theirs known as the music disc. The music disc was actually one of the first inventions that the ancient city created, and it allowed them to record the audio of special events and then play them back using a jukebox. For example, music disc subscribe shows how they subscribed. For example, music disc cat could be an explanation of how the ancient people were able to tame cats and all the biological information they had on them. Now, hold up, that may sound crazy, but keep this in mind. The civilizations in Minecraft don't communicate like we do. Take the villagers for example. They don't communicate using complex language. Instead, they use simple sounds, yet they can still understand each other quite well. So, it's likely that the ancient civilization also didn't communicate using complex language, but instead they just used various different sounds to communicate. And so, while all the discs may just sound like music to us, it could be that they are complex works of art to the ancient people that they can understand and learn from. Regardless, all of these different discs that were created had some levels of importance to the ancient people, as we know that they wanted to learn about redstone, and a key part of doing so would have been learning from previous experiments. And as such, it's likely that they would have wanted to keep most of their discs safe. And so, leaving all the discs just lying in chests where they could be stolen wasn't going to be a viable option for the ancient people. And so, they came up with a few ideas. At first, they tried to create modified pigs to keep these discs safe, but there are a few problems with that. These genetically modified pigs could easily just be killed and have the discs stolen. Also, leaving the discs with pigs would just cause them to be damaged. And so, the ancient people thought for a while, and then they came up with a much better solution. And that was to transform these modified pigs into pig cyborg machines that could protect the discs with their lives by hiding the discs inside them. And so these pig machines were programmed so that they would only give up the disc that they were protecting to a person that was within the ancient civilization. But if someone not from the ancient civilization tried to take the discs, it would self-destruct, destroying both itself and the disc it was holding, thus protecting all the knowledge on the disc. And finally, this machine would have a camouflage outer casing to keep it hidden from everyone else not inside the ancient city. As that way, it would stop enemies running up to it, and thus it would stop any unnecessary explosions. And now, if you haven't guessed already, this machine was the Creeper. And while it's great to know why it was made, we're still left with many unanswered questions, such as why does the Creeper give up his disc when a skeleton shoots it, and why does it always chase after the player, and most importantly, why are they scared of the cats? All of which I'll get into in just a minute. So, the Creeper became the new inhabitant of the ancient city. All the discs were now safe, the city was thriving, and everyone was happy. Until the incident. You see, a group of evil evokers had used their dark magic to attack the city, but in doing so, they accidentally created the Skulk, which infected the city, killing most of the ancient people and most of the evokers. But luckily for the Creepers, most of them were able to escape and they were unaffected by the Skulk. But that was mainly due to the fact that the Creepers didn't exactly have a soul, as they were mostly machines, and so they were useless to the Skulk, who only wanted to gather souls. But the rest of the civilization wasn't as lucky, as most of them were killed and turned into Skulk. But those who did survive fell into three categories, those being the unaffected, the decayed, or the undead. The unaffected, well, they were just that, unaffected. They were still 100% functioning, but once they saw the state of the other two types of survivors, they abandoned them, seeing them as a waste of time trying to save, and they started their own new civilizations, being the villagers and the illagers. Next, the decayed. This group had been massively affected by the Skulk outbreak, and although they had escaped, they had become infected by some mysterious disease caused by the Skulk. The disease that they had caught caused them to start decaying from within, mainly at the brain, which meant that they had lost most of their brain power, thus turning this group of once intelligent people to dumb green monsters, with their only goal being to infect others to take their souls. And finally, the undead. They were the slightly luckier ones. Although they had been killed in the disaster at the ancient city, they had actually been partially resurrected. But it was really just an accident, as in the process of the evokers using dark magic to save themselves from the sculpt, they accidentally started resurrecting some of the other members of the ancient civilization. And when the evokers realized that, they had a choice to make. Do they continue protecting themselves while also resurrecting the dead members of the ancient civilization, or do they stop protecting themselves to stop the ancient people being resurrected? And overall, they decided that they would make sure that they were protected, and that's how the skeleton was formed. Also, the strays were those who were resurrected from ancient cities in the frozen biomes. But how does that explain why the skeleton shooting the creepers causes them to drop their music disc? Well, let's have another look at the survivors of the ancient city. The villagers and the illagers had turned their back on the ancient civilization, so by the creepers' own programming, it could no longer give the discs to the villagers or the illagers, as they were technically no longer part of the ancient civilization. The zombies, well, they had lost all sense of rationality, as they no longer had a functioning brain. That being said, it could still be possible that the creeper would give the discs to them if they wanted them, because they technically never left the ancient civilization. However, the zombies no longer knew how to access the disc, and even if they could, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And that leaves the skeletons and the strays. They still had all their knowledge of their past at the ancient city. They were just in a much more weakened state now, but the creeper was still able to recognize them as part of the ancient civilization. So when a skeleton ever tries to hit the creeper using their bow, the creeper thinks that that is because it wants to access the disc, and as such, it drops them. But today, the skeletons don't interact much with the creepers, as they just don't have the guts to relive the sad memories from the discs about their lost home. And so today, the creepers are just aimlessly wandering around the world with no desire to chase the skeletons to give their discs back. So then why do the creepers always chase up to the player just to explode? It doesn't do that to any other mob. Well, let's think about it. This Minecraft world is millions, if not tens of millions of years old. Yet, for most of that time, the creeper has been wandering the world alone. So, when it sees you, a strange new humanoid creature, it wonders, what are you? Maybe you could be a long-lost citizen of the ancient city that wants their disc back, and so it starts to get closer. However, as it gets closer and closer to you, it realizes that you aren't part of the ancient city. In fact, it has no idea who you are. So, just as it was programmed to do, it self-destructs. Other than exploding, do you know what else they were programmed to do? Run away from cats. Now, why could that be? Cats aren't dangerous, or are they? Well, here's a possible explanation. When the ancient people were transforming the pigs into explodable machines to protect the discs, many experiments would go wrong. Maybe these creeper prototypes would just explode as soon as they saw the researchers trying to take the discs away from them. Or maybe they would just explode as soon as the TNT was added inside of them. Either way, the ancient researchers needed a plan to stay safe from the creeper when things went wrong. And so, that's when the ancient researchers added a program that made the creeper run away from cats. After all, the ancient city had discovered ways to tame cats, and using cats to scare off the creepers meant that when the researchers felt that the creeper was going to wrongly explode, they could easily divert that explosion away. But once the ancient people had made the creeper as they intended it to be, they didn't remove that program, as they probably had plans to improve it in the future, before, well, the incident. But speaking of that, do you know how the evokers caused it? Well, watch this video to find out.